We're gonna try with the microphone in a place that a microphone should be. How about that? Instead of me waving it around in front of my face the entire time. Hi, what's happening? You are very juicy. You are literally creating a breeze with how hard your tail is wagging. Hi kids, welcome back to another pizza party. I'm Mrs. Pizza. Show them your face. This is Winnie. This is my good girl. Where's Cheese? There's Cheese. Cheese likes to keep an eye on us. She likes to be involved, but not in front and center. And I get that. It's hard being perceived sometimes. Winnie is going to become upset because I'm not petting her. That's what I thought. Ow. Okay. We're just gonna have to deal with it. We're here to do a recent reads. Why? Because if I wait too long, it's too many books and it's overwhelming. So I like to do this while it's a little bit short. So we are here today to do a recap of some of the books I've read recently. And I'm gonna be real honest, when I was getting these books together, I was kind of impressed with the vibe that was happening. I was like, okay, I was having a cozy / funny fantasy moment. I was really living my fantasy dreams. The first 3 books we are going to talk about are all by the same author, and so we are going to lump them all together. So they were kind of sprinkled through this a little more, but we're gonna all stick them together and make things easy. There's a dog hair floating right here. The first book we're going to talk about is the one that I started my journey with, and that is Equal Rites by Terry Pratchett. This is the first book that I had ever read in the Discworld series by this author, and I'm in love. I am absolutely in love with the series. I am in love with this author. I'm happy to have finally found this series, and I don't know what my problem was and why it took me so long to get here. Discworld series has some crazy amount of books. I think it's like 40 books or something. Absolutely unfathomable. Unfathomable? I think I got it right that time. It is a fantasy world that is like sarcastic and satirical and playing with stereotypes and just so stinking funny. It's a funny, silly, good time. And I really think it would be incredibly hard to be having a bad day while you're reading Discworld. The Discworld series itself starts with 2 books, but there are series within the series. So there is the Witch series, which starts with Equal Rites. There's the Death series. There's the Guard series. There's series within the series. And so fans of the series like to give you starting point to where you can begin your Discworld journey. When I did a little bit of digging into this, there was kind of 3 books that people told you should start with. And those 3 books, none of them were the first 2 books. Basically, it's like you should only read the first 2 books if you're a completionist and need to go back because he hit his stride as soon as he hit the 3rd book. So I started with Equal Rites, which is the first book in the Witch series. This is the story of Esk. And in the opening of this book, we have a wizard who is traveling down a road using wizard GPS methods to find a very specific person when he happens upon a small house, knocks on the door, and he's like, hey, you're the 7th son and you're about to have a 7th son born, and I'm about to make him a wizard. And so this wizard bestows his wizardness upon the child that is born. But it's not a son that's born, it's a daughter. And in this world, men are wizards, women are witches, there is no crossover, and you can't be both for sure. But Esk is completely different. She's a girl that has wizard powers, and she is taken in by Granny Weatherwax. And this is when we are first introduced to this character, and she is absolutely hilarious. She is very, very upset that she has such a beautiful complexion and all of her teeth, because if she was missing a bunch and covered in warts, it would definitely add to her witchy aesthetic. She is hilarious and is very, very just black and white about this is how things are, this is how they've always been, but now she has this child who just throws a wrench in that whole business. She's a completely different type of magic. And so these 2 go on an adventure and I really adore this. It's a really sweet story. I love stories of children that either have like powers or missions or great epic journeys way above where they should. Just that is one of my favorite things in fantasy books. The kid who's going out on the big adventure. This was a good introduction to the world because we kind of get a sprinkling of the different cities and the different places in this world. After that, I decided to pick up Mort, which is book 4, but book 1 in the Death series. And Mort, again, is a story of a young person that has ended up in a situation way above their pay grade. Just way too Way too. So this is the story of Mort, and he is a young man who one day his father takes him into town to get him an apprenticeship because his dad just doesn't understand Mort. Nobody understands Mort. And this very young man becomes the apprentice to Death. Now Death is kind of looking for a little bit of a break. He wants a little bit of a holiday. And so he starts piling on Mort more and more responsibility way before Mort should ever be put in charge of anything. Mort is a teenage boy who is the apprentice to Death. Like, it's such a funny, fun story. I had a really good time with it. I laughed, I smiled, I enjoyed Mort. The next book I picked up after that, I decided to continue on with the Witches series within Discworld, so I picked up Wyrd Sisters. And this one was an absolute joy. It's a delight. It's a delightful book. This one, you have 3 witches as the main characters. Granny Weatherwax from our first book. We have Nanny Og, who looks exactly like you think a witch would look. She's an old tiny crone, and she has way too many kids. Kids on grandkids. This woman, she had a very healthy sex life, apparently. Anyways, and we have, is it Magrat? We're just gonna go with Magrat, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. This is a play on Macbeth in the best way possible. This is the story of 3 witches who get pulled into this political upheaval that's happening. A duke has murdered the king and usurped the throne, and in doing so tried to take out the only heir, who was a baby at the time. This baby ends up in the care of 3 witches, who then get brought into this story of treachery and thrones and political people being awful, but also ghosts and magic and theater, and it's so funny and fun. So these 3 witches just get wrapped up in this nonsense. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and the hints at Macbeth are fun, the hints at Shakespeare are fun. It's just such a silly good time, and I really, really enjoyed it. The next book I decided to pick after that, I decided to keep going with my fun fantasy, but make it cozy. And I picked up Dreadful. This is by Rozakis. I picked this up, honestly, because look at it. It's absolutely adorable. And this was I believe it was like a Barnes & Noble's pick for the month. There's stickers like all over. I was like finding stickers inside the book that were like, yeah, what is happening? Somebody at Barnes & Noble's had too many stickers and didn't know what to do with it. This is marketed as a cozy fantasy. This is the story of a person that wakes up on the floor and has amnesia, and they take a look around, and they are obviously in some sort of magical room where some sort of catastrophic explosion has just happened, and they've got to get out of here quick because this looks like the lair of some sort of evil sorcerer. Then they quickly realize that they actually might be the evil sorcerer, but they have no memory of how they got here, what happened, who they are, and why the heck they were an evil sorcerer to begin with. And so then we have to kind of hide it from all the other evil bad guys that we've lost all of our evil bad guy memories, and figure out why we have a princess locked in the dungeon. Who are all these tiny little minion creatures that are helping me out? Where am I? Who am I? And how did I get here? This sounded like a really good cozy time. It's kind of marketed as a little bit more cozy than it is. I ended up giving this a 3-star. I didn't dislike it, but I feel like something was just a little bit off for me with this. I either needed it to go cozier, I needed it to go cuter, which it tried to, but I feel like when it tried to, it felt heavy-handed. Instead, I think it would have done better if it leaned into like the spooky kind of vibes, where if this was more of a silly, spooky good time, and there's moments of that, and I feel like that worked best for me. The moat and the spooky castle, if we just leaned into this being like a hapless, spoopy good time, I think I would have liked it more. It was fine. It's cute. There's a romantic element in this as well, which was fine. I didn't really love it, and I didn't think it was necessary. As someone that really likes romance books, sometimes I feel like it's put in books that it's not 100% necessary, and that's fine. I get what we were trying to do, but I just didn't feel it. It just didn't work for me. I'm making this sound like it was a horrible book. This is not a horrible book. It was a silly good time, and it was cozy. it was cozy-ish. The next book I picked up after that was The Undermining of Twilight and Frank, and this is by Megan Bannen. This is the second book in a series that starts with the Undertaking of Hart and Mercy. This book rocked my socks off. I absolutely adored this. This is the story of, obviously, Hart and Mercy, but Hart is this sheriff, police officer, cowboy type situation, and he works in this magical realm that we have to travel to that there's zombies in. This is one of those books when I start listing off all of the different elements, it feels absolutely crazy because it's kind of like You've Got Mail, but there's zombies and there's gods and demigods and there's a magical realm and people store their souls in their appendixes. Soft world building, there's not really too much time spent explaining some of this stuff to you. You're smart enough to pick up on what it means, because really this boils down to being a story about Hart, who is lonely and does not get along with Mercy. Mercy runs the local undertaking. Well, I guess her father really runs it, but Mercy's in charge. And in this world, when someone dies, their body has to be properly dealt with so they don't come back as a zombie. So Hart, when he goes to this magical place and kills these magical zombies, has to bring them to Mercy so that these people don't get up and walk around again. These two had a very prickly first meeting and just don't get along. But then one day, in a moment of pure loneliness, Hart pens a letter, doesn't sign it, and just kind of slips it into the world, not realizing that it's delivered to Mercy. And then these two start writing letters without knowing who they're writing to, form a friendship that turns into something more. I am a sucker for the letter writing trope. I am an absolute, no. That's all you need to know. I don't even need to describe the things I would do for the letter writing trope. It is my kryptonite. This book really pulls on your heartstrings. You get to the end of the book and you are absolutely ugly crying. If you're not, do you have emotions? Do you feel feelings? And then you close the book with this like goofy smile on your face. Like you are so worried when it's ripping your heart out that it's not going to give it back to you, and it gives it back to you. I loved this book. And so I was extremely excited to pick up this book. This book is happening in the same world in the same small town as our former book, but we are now following two of the other sheriff-type police officers. One is Twyla and one is Frank, and they've been best friends for a very, very, very long time. They're also next door neighbors. The reason that Twyla is even in this profession is because Frank talked her into it, and they've been partners ever since. They both previously were married. Frank's relationship ended in divorce. Twyla is a widow. They have grown children, and they've just kind of been best friends for a very long time. They get wrapped up in something that's going on in this magical realm that's not supposed to exist. There is a crime ring happening, and they're trying to figure out what they're stealing, why they're stealing it, when they happen upon a magical thing that shouldn't exist and does, and then it ropes them into this whole super secret, we've got to keep this from everyone. Twyla and Frank, their relationship is tested, and bad guys are trying to find what they have. Other people come in and disrupt the equilibrium of Twyla and Frank's relationship. Here's what I will say about this one. Even though I am a sucker for friends to lovers, absolutely love that trope, and I really, really enjoy older characters' romances as well for the most part, there was just something about this that wasn't working for me. I wasn't nearly as invested, and I can't really put my finger on why. I still really enjoyed this, but I feel like I had such an emotional reaction to the first book, whereas this one just felt like a run-of-the-mill fantasy romance to me. And maybe it could be because a lot of the history between the two characters was kind of like slowly dealt out to you. For the most part, not even in flashbacks. They're just kind of having quick little rememberings of different times that kind of solidified their friendship together. I also felt like there was no hard and fast reason that these two hadn't explored their feelings previously, other than they just didn't. It was fine. It wasn't the absolute heart melting moment that the first book was. I'm glad I read it. I'll continue on with the series because I like the world that's been created, but it was just, I think I ended up giving this like a 3 or a 3.5. It was fine. It was a good time. And the last book we're going to talk about was The Spellshop by Sarah Beth Durst. This is another absolutely beautiful book. And I have read books previously by this author, but this was advertised as a cozy fantasy, cottagecore romantasy. And it is and it isn't. I feel like if you are someone that is a very well-read romantasy reader, this might not work for you. This should have been marketed more as just a cozy fantasy cottagecore. Even though there is a romance element in this, I don't feel like that should have been how it was marketed, only because the romance was the least successful part of this for me. And not that I didn't like either of the characters, and not that I didn't like them together, but just how the romance was written, because this is not even a closed door. We just don't get into any of the steamy bits with our characters, which is, again, fine. It shouldn't have been like one of the pillars of the draw to this. The romance felt like part of the story, not the actual push of the story. I hope that makes sense. This is the story of Keela, and she works at a great big library in a great big city in this fantasy world. But there is unrest in the city because the elites and the powerful have been keeping magic all to themselves and slowly kind of getting a tighter and tighter grasp on it as time has gone on. But Keela's not really aware of this because she never leaves the library. She has one real friend, and it's her assistant Kaz, and he's a sentient spider plant. And so these two, in the beginning of this book, are having to flee the library when rebels have crashed the gates and the library is going to be burnt down. And so they grab as many books as they can, jump in a boat, and head out to the very small town on a very small island that Keela grew up on. And she finds the rundown house that her family left many, many years before and starts to fix it up. And this is the story of Keela making friends, becoming part of the island, meeting the nice neighbor who just keeps showing up and helping her, even though she's kind of grumpy and does not give off the best impression. He's just a sweet cinnamon roll man and is just going to keep showing up and helping her out because she has no idea what she's doing. There is reasons that Keela has to keep a lot of secrets about herself, even as she starts to make friendships. And overall, this is a really sweet and cozy time. Some of my biggest complaints with this, and I think this comes from me reading a lot of romance, is that a lot of our characters were given like very fleshed out descriptions of themselves. Keela has blue skin and blue hair and magenta freckles. She meets a villager that's a centaur. There's a woman that runs the bakery who's got horns and fur. We're given all the descriptions of these fun fantasy characters, except for our male main character. I swear to you, other than being big and having a really great smile, I have no idea what this man's hair and skin looked like in this fantasy world. It could have been anything. He could have been green. Hello. Why not tell me what he looks like? But instead, we were little to no time was spent on this very important character's description. I even went back and tried to find it. I was like, did they tell us what color his hair was? What color was this man's hair? And why do I care so much? I guess because they spent so much time describing what the centaur was wearing every time she showed up. And then you're trying to picture how a dress works on a horse body. There was a lot of lack of description around him. I also found that even though I liked this sweet romance that starts forming, that wasn't the main parts of the book I liked the most. It's similar to Bookshops and Bonedust and Legends and Lattes, where the town, like the really sweet, lovely nature of all of the characters of this town is really where the charm lies in the book. Even though the romance is sweet and fine, it's the charm of the friendships and the characters in the seaside town full of fantasy creatures who their local pest / native animal life is cats that have sweet little wings on them. Like, that sounds adorable. It's a town full of kittens with wings. There's even a kitten with wings on the book. This book was successful in being a cottagecore cozy fantasy for me, and I enjoyed it. Sweet, fun time. But that, kids, after me reading apparently all of this silly, cozy fantasy, is where we're gonna stop this one. And I can't sit here prattling on about books forever, even though I would really enjoy it. But if you had fun hanging out with me and the dogs, please subscribe. I hope you're reading good books out there, wherever you are, and I'd love to hear about them. And I'll see you next time.